of you. My heart beats with every thought of you. You're the one I can't let go. In your arms I find my home, love.
Oh, Star? No, I can't date her. Maybe because she used to sleep with you. We never slept together, Chuck, and she's a good person. Unfortunately, she was not the surprise I had this morning. Chuck smiled. Geez, nothing to do for fun around here. That's because people actually work. Chuck chuckled. So who is this surprise? Can you imagine me and Helen? Mass Helen? Chuck nodded. No, no, not Helen. You can't. Chuck frowned. If you were not happily married, I would have started suspecting you. Chuck, I know you and the rate you go through women. She's not in your league, like you were not worse than me before you found an angel and had the good sense to marry her. Helen is a keeper. You only go after her if you are ready to commit. And she's not the holiday kind of girl. She's a big girl. And who knows, maybe she's what I need to make a commitment. Chuck got up. I thought you came to supervise how your money is growing. Yep, but I've changed my mind. How do you guys manage it? Sitting at a place for hours? He winked and left. Uche watched him leave. Then he remembered Chuck and Helen. He was suddenly wishing that Helen would be what his brother needed to make a commitment. Helen knew it was time to go, but somehow she couldn't find the strength to get up from her sitting position. She was dreading the party and at the same time looking forward to it. It wasn't just the party she was dreading, it was Chuck. She didn't have the foggiest idea of what to say to him or how to act when she saw him again. She wondered if he was thinking about their kiss the same way she had been thinking about it. She could feel herself being crushed to the wall and being kissed senseless, her body on fire wanting more. But somehow she knew she might not be getting more ever again. Guys like Chuck don't fall for a nobody like her. She was just mad stuff and nothing more. She sighed. She wished. What did she wish? She asked herself. That things were different? No, she cautioned herself. Things were this way for a reason. She lost her memories for a reason. She came to work for Mma for a reason. If only she could find out what those reasons were, maybe she would believe just a little that someone like Chuck might actually fall in love with her, that he would spend the whole day thinking about their kiss and devise ways to kiss her again. She sighed again. It all seemed like nothing but a dream that would never come true. She was Helen, a fictitious name she picked up. Even if Chuck was to love her, she could never love him back unless her memories came back. A cough sounded from the door and she looked up sharply and found Mma by the door. Are you alright? Mma asked, concerned. She had been watching Helen for a time and saw a series of bitter emotions pass through her face, and she wondered again how little she knew Helen. I'm fine, Helen answered, trying to smile. Is it time already? Mma nodded. I thought you would like a ride to Eden. Or is Prince Charming picking you up? Prince Charming? Mma laughed. I told you your time would come, and I would tease you as mercilessly as you teased me. He's not my Prince Charming. I just met him. Just? Who was it flirting with him at our last show? Helen laughed. Okay, but he's not my Prince Charming, and he's not picking me up, so thanks for the ride. You're welcome. Helen stood up and followed Mma out, dreading every step she took. Helen looked out of the window of Mma's car. She watched the scenery but not seeing it. She had never dreaded going to Mma's house before, but today was different. She was afraid of everything that could go wrong. She was afraid of making a fool of herself again before Chuck. She wanted this party over and done with so she could go back to figuring out who she was. She had let it slide for far too long. She had been afraid of what she would find, too afraid of the man in the mask, and later too afraid of telling Mma because she had left it for too long. But she was no longer afraid. She was going to do a lot of research. She would visit specialists, no matter what it took. she would find out who she was. Then she sighed again. She also had to figure out a way to tell Mma. She heaved another sigh. If I didn't know any better, I would think you don't want to come to my house, Mma said, staring at her briefly before turning to the road. Of course not. I wouldn't miss Sean's party for the world. Glad to hear it, but something is bothering you, Helen. Really, I'm fine, Mma. I think I've been overdoing it, trying to impress you, Amber, and your mother-in-law. It's not an easy undertaking. Mma smiled. Whenever you are ready to talk about it, I'm here. I'm sorry, Helen said lamely. Of course, Mma would see through her lies. She wanted to tell her so badly, but the time was not right. She would tell her when you had better make it soon, before she finds out by herself, her mind whispered. Knowing Mma, she could just figure it out just like that. Helen stifled another sigh. She would tell Mma, but not before she visited a doctor and had taken the first steps into finding out who she was. Then she would have enough to tell her, and smiled hesitantly. It is not like I don't want to tell you, but I need to figure it out a little bit more in my mind first. Mma squeezed her hands and nodded as she drew to a stop. Coming out of the car, Helen could hear a pair of tiny feet running towards them, shouting, Mama, Mama! The tiny feet ran into his mother's already spread hands. Mma gave her son a hug and kissed him all over. Where is Grandma? Hello, love, Helen said. Kahin! The boy exclaimed and jumped down his mother's body and into Helen's outstretched hands. Helen entered the guest suite she always used whenever she had to spend the night at Eden. She dropped her overnight bag on the bed and sat down and heaved a sigh. So here she was, finally about to meet Chuck again in a few hours. Her mind went back to that kiss. She shouldn't be reliving it, but she couldn't help herself. She shouldn't be looking forward to it again, but that was all she could do to keep herself from running mad. To distract herself, she hung the attire for tomorrow and laid out the bikini and short dress she was wearing over it. She should go out and meet the others, yet she couldn't put one foot in front of the other. Whether she wanted it or not, she was going to see Chuck again. That wasn't her reluctance. Then she realized she was afraid of herself. She knew somehow that her resistance to Chuck, if he tried to finish what they had started, was 0 to none. Not that she wanted to resist the man if he was really interested in her. No, she wouldn't, because she had stopped lying to herself. He was the love of her life, simple and short. The only reason she was trying hard at resisting him was because of her amnesia. Before she entered the relationship, she needed to find out who she was. She didn't want a case where she would be very serious with a man only to wake up one morning and find out she was a loving wife to another man, she thought ruefully. Why was she thinking too far ahead? The only thing closest to a relationship Chuck would be wanting from her would be more than weekend fling ending tomorrow night. That is, if his interest stayed that long. You are not going to solve the whole problem right now, Helen, she told herself. The best thing she could do for herself would be to dress up and go down to meet the others. With determined footsteps, she left the room. Helen found people gathered around the kitchen table snacking, but there was no sign of Chuck. For that she was grateful. Seeing him there would have shaken her equilibrium, no matter the pep talk she had given to herself. Amber was the first to see her. Hello, darling. Amber cued and dragged her into the circle. Soon Helen was mingling and laughing and having fun. She tried not to spare Chuck a thought. He could go to blazes for all she cared. She was glad she was dressed for the occasion. It would have been difficult to compete with Amber in white bikini and sarong. How possible was it that any woman could compete with the kind of figure Amber in her 50s could boast of? except maybe Mma when she got to that age. So Helen, how are the designs coming up? Rose, Mma's mother-in-law, asked. Helen opened her mouth to answer, but Chuck entered at that very moment, and she forgot what she was going to say. She just stared at him like a foolish teenager. Helen ate him up with her eyes. If anyone noticed how hungrily she was looking at him, they didn't say, and she didn't care because she couldn't help herself. All she could do was stare and admire how handsome he looked in jeans and t-shirts that did nothing to hide his bulging and rippling muscles. She swallowed hard and tried without success to rein in her thoughts. She wanted this man with every fiber of her being. She wanted nothing more than for him to belong to her. She watched with growing dread and excitement as he made his way around the table, greeting family and friends he hadn't seen in a while. She watched him swing Sean up and around. Helen wondered what he would do when he reached her side of the table. She feared, somehow, that he would ignore her or greet her dismissively like he had always done. That was before she snuck into his bedroom and jumped him. It would be nothing short of what she deserved if he decided he didn't want anything to do with her again. She thought sadly. An excited laughter cut into her thoughts and got her looking up. Chuck was swinging Mma around. Helen couldn't help the momentary envy that engulfed her. She wanted that same treatment, she realized. She wanted to be held in his arms. She wanted... This is not helping, Helen said to herself. So with a sinking heart, she watched as Uche came to his wife's rescue, neatly taking her from Chuck's hands. Go find your own wife, Uche said. Mma laughed gleefully. You think that is going to earn you my forgiveness? I am so sorry, Pocket. I couldn't come home for the dedication. Chuck apologized with a wink. Helen, watching, felt something tug at the root of her heart. If only... Stop it! She snapped at herself impatiently. This would never be. Even if Chuck remotely returned her feelings somehow, it would still not matter unless her memories returned. Pocket? Amber wondered aloud. Yes, Pocket, Helen thought. It had just occurred to her that Chuck called Mma Pocket, and she wondered what it meant and why she had never heard the nickname before then. Chuck thinks with her height and her curves, she is pocket size and had taken up to calling her Pocket, Eva explained. Amber laughed. Helen felt her heart sink lower. She had always suspected that there was a part of Chuck that was in love with Mma. Competing with Mma was a lost cause because Mma was all that she wasn't. She knew how much he emphasized on Mma's beauty and brain. Stop it! She screamed at herself silently. The right thing to do, she told herself, would be to leave the table so she could get a hold of her erratic thoughts before she behaved or said something she would forever regret. What a nickname, Amber reflected. Helen turned to her and managed a smile. She had to join the discussion to stop eating him up with her eyes before anyone noticed. It fits, Helen said, but it came out in a mere whisper. If anybody had, they gave no indication. Uche decided at that very moment that his wife needed kissing. Show off, Chuck laughed and turned to Amber. Amber, make me the happiest man on earth and marry me. You would compete with these two, give them a run for their love. I am a grandmother and too old for you. You don't look a day beyond 30. Amber laughed. Now that's a comforting thought. Helen tried to stay current with the conversation, but it seemed impossible because she couldn't help being disappointed that he once more acted like he didn't know her. He had said hi, kissed and hugged everyone but her. Even the hated IJ got a reluctant hi from him. She hadn't gotten even a smile, she thought miserably. She knew he didn't care she existed. Neither had she cared so much before. But after what nearly happened that morning, she expected at least the slightest acknowledgement from him. Who was she kidding? The man might have forgotten what happened. Maybe he had chalked it down to another morning in Chuck Toby's fabulous life. She was sure that having a girl fall out of nowhere and onto his bed was normal for him. Helen fumed inside, wishing she was anywhere but sitting down stiffly and feeling invisible. Why she thought she wanted this man she couldn't tell. He was arrogant, prideful, and insensitive. Yes, she knew she wasn't up to the class of girls he dated, but ignoring her in the midst of everyone was painful and thoughtless of him, and she wanted nothing more than to leave the room. But she couldn't do that without drawing undue attention to herself, or worst, giving the arrogant pig the impression that she was running away or that his desperate insult got to her. Suddenly she felt a hand touch and squeeze her shoulder. Chuck! Her heart leaped in joy, saving the best for the last. He bent down and whispered into her ears. Helen couldn't help the shudder that ran through her body as his breath kissed her skin. I believe we have unfinished business. She should say something, anything to dissuade him or to get people from wondering what he was saying to her, but she was incapable of the barest of thoughts. I have been looking forward to seeing you and have been afraid that you would decide not to come. He dropped a kiss on top of her hair and left her alone to make sense of what he said. Helen looked at the others, afraid that they somehow heard or saw, but everyone was engrossed in what they were doing, and she breathed a sigh of relief. She sneaked a look at him, and he caught her eyes and held it. Helen couldn't look away. He was truly the definition of a Greek god. No man had the right to be this handsome. No man should be allowed to have this kind of powerful hold on a woman. The kind he had on her. Helen felt her mouth water, then go dry. She had to wet her lips. Misunderstanding the art, he winked and toasted her with the bottle of water he had taken from the fridge. She needed rescuing, Helen thought. Chuck thought the weekend was a perfect venue to finish up what had nearly happened in the morning, and she was very afraid because she didn't know if she could resist him if he made a move on her. One thing was clear, she didn't have control of her senses or body when he was around, so she needed something or someone to save her from what would turn out to be the biggest mistake of her life. She didn't want to be his lover, an itch that needed to be scratched and soon forgotten. Besides, even if he offered her the world, which to her meant marriage, she would still turn him down because of her lost memories. Marriage? Was she dreaming? All Chuck wanted was to satisfy his curiosity and nothing more. She needed to do something to save herself from the shame that might come later if she couldn't resist him. Maybe she should leave? Leave and save herself. If she did that, Mma would be hurt and confused. That she wouldn't ever do to Mma. The housekeeper ushering someone in got her looking up, and then she smiled. Somehow she could believe there was someone up there who was watching and listening. Dave, Helen said and got up to hug him. If Dave was surprised by her enthusiastic greeting, he didn't show. He held on to her longer than she intended. Chuck watched the scene with a feeling he couldn't begin to understand, a feeling he didn't care to put into words. He only came to the bitter conclusion that no woman was different. They were all the same, ready to drop their pants at the sight of a bigger fish, no matter how deep their commitment to someone else was. He felt eyes on him and caught Uche watching him. He smiled at him and rolled his shoulders dismissively. Then he noticed Star. Ever since he came in, he only had eyes for Helen and no one else. Had he not tried to stop himself from rushing to her by making sure he greeted her last? And all the while, he didn't know that the little tramp had a boyfriend. He dismissed his confused feelings from his mind and turned to Star. If there was a woman who had been consistent in what she felt for him, it was Star.
In the still of the night, I think of you. My heart beats with every thought of you. You're the one I can't let go. In your arms arms I find my home. Love, sweet love, it's you I'm dreaming